Hello friends, welcome to CSS video tutorials series. In the previous video tutorial, we understood how to draw HTML DOM tree for a given HTML code. Also, we understood various terminologies with respect to the DOM tree structure. We understood what is a root node, what are leaf nodes, what are children's, what are parents, what are ancestors, what are descendants. In this video tutorial, I am going to discuss CSS Descendant Selector. Before we proceed and understand what a descendant selector can do, first we understand descendants of a node. In the previous video tutorial, we already learned what are descendants of a node. Descendants of a node are any node falling under the selected node tree. That is, direct children, children's children, children's children's children, and so on up to the leaf nodes are considered as descendants of a node. In this example, for this div, the descendants are direct children, which are header, div and footer, children's children, which are h2, p, a element, p element, a element, h2, p, a element. All these are descendants. All these are descendants only, because direct children and children's children, children's children, and so on up to the leaf node are considered as descendants. For this header, h2, p and a elements are descendants because they are direct children of the header node. Similarly, for this div element, the direct children p and a are considered as descendants. Similarly, for the footer, the descendants are h2 element, p element and a element. Here I have a code, same code. You can observe here for the body element. For the body element, all these elements, div, header, footer, all these elements are considered as descendants. For this div, all these elements are considered as descendants. For the header, all these elements are considered as descendants. For this div, all these elements are considered as descendants. For this footer, all these elements are considered as descendants. I hope now you understood what are descendants. Let's proceed further and understand descendant selector. Descendant selector selects any HTML element targeted by a selector written after the space character, which is or are descendant or descendants of any HTML element targeted by the selector written before the space character. We already know the syntax of CSS rule set, which is selector and then in flower brackets we write declaration list. To implement descendant selector in place of a selector, we write selectors one beside another separated by white space character. You can see here the syntax of a descendant selector. Selector 1, white space, selector 2, white space, selector 3, white space, and so on. In flower brackets, we write declaration list. With respect to this code, it selects any HTML element targeted by the selector 2. Any HTML element targeted by the selector 2, which is a descendant or descendants of any HTML element targeted by selector 1. For example, here I have written div space p. Now div is a tag selector, p is a tag selector. Now what this code does is it selects any p element. It selects any p element which is descendant or descendants of any div element and applies a border of 2px solid red on that. Let's see the code and understand the demonstration of descendant selector. Here I have the previous code and its output. We have a div element. In that we have a header, another div and a footer. And in the header we have h2, p element and a element. Similarly, in the div we have a paragraph and anchor. In the footer we have h2, paragraph and anchor. In this page I am going to say here style type equal to text or CSS close. Then I say here closing style. Now I am going to tell to the system, locate any div if it has a descendant or descendants with the name p and apply these styles on them. So here I say border of 2px solid red semicolon. Now what happens means browser locates any div. Here we have two div. This is one div, this is another div. Locates any div if it has a descendant called as p. You can see in this div element we have a paragraph element which is a descendant of this div, and this paragraph is also descendants of this div as well as this div. This paragraph is the descendant of this div because for this div all these elements are descendants only. So all these paragraphs, this paragraph are going to have border of 2px solid red. File, save, go to browser and refresh. You can see these three paragraphs are having the border set to 2px solid red. Let's change the code and understand. If I change here to header, now what I am telling to the system that locate any header element in this page. If it has a descendant element with the name p and apply this border. So here in this header we have one paragraph element which is the descendant of the header. So definitely that paragraph is going to have the border set to 2px solid red, not these two because they are not descendants of the header. So file, save, go to browser and refresh. You can see only the header paragraph has the border set to 2px solid red. If I change it to footer this time, file, save. Now what I am telling, locate a footer element or any footer element in this page. At present this is the footer present. If it has a descendant element, a paragraph element, and then apply the border 2px solid red. File, save, go to browser and refresh. You can see that only that paragraph has the border of 2px which is in the footer element. Hope you guys are understanding how the descendant selector works. Let's take an example that I want only this paragraph should have a red border. Now how do I do that? If I write here div, that will not work out because this paragraph and this paragraph, all these three paragraphs are descendants of the div element which is here. So the solution to that problem is we can take help of ID selector. So here I give ID inner. I am telling this div is the inner div. Then how do we write a code? Here I say locate a div which has an ID inner. If it has a descendant HTML element p, apply the border to px solid red. Of course here div which has a ID inner has a descendant paragraph element. So if I say file, save, go to browser and refresh, you can see that inner div paragraph element has the border set to 2 pixel solid red. And also if I write here body body space, this time I am using a tag selector space then combination selector space a tag selector. Now what I am telling here to the system or a browser that locate a body element, okay, if it has a descendant element with the name div which has a ID inner, that is this one, okay. If it has a descendant element p element, that is this one, apply the border to px solid red. File, save, go to browser and refresh. So we get the same output. That means selector 1 space selector 2 space selector 3. So here this indicates descendant selector, friends. So remember that descendants are direct children, children's children, children's children's children, and so on up to the leaf nodes are considered as descendants of a node. So descendants of a node are targeted by descendant selectors. A white space between the selectors indicates a CSS descendant selector. I hope you guys have clearly understood how you can use the descendant selector. What's the meaning of that? I suggest you people to try using the descendant selector in your websites. For this tutorial, this much is enough, friends. For more benefits and be updated, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and don't forget to like, comment and share these videos with others so that everyone will get benefited. Keep learning, keep coding, keep sharing. Thank you guys. Thank you very much. See you in the next tutorial.